Hi guys, I'm Beth with Remark. I'm doing an extra video this month so I can talk about Black History Month and some great books that you should be reading by African American authors. Thanks for joining today, guys. February is Black History Month, and so I wanted to make sure that the month didn't go by without being able to recognize some great authors. Now, these are authors that you should be reading not necessarily because they're Black or African American, but because they're just really good authors with great things to say. So, I am going to run down a list of genres across the board, along with my recommendation of a book that you can read. Of course, there are many, many more authors besides the ones I'm going to mention that you could and should be reading. Feel free to add those in the comments and read with your heart's desire all of the wonderful authors that are out there to celebrate the month in the way that it should be celebrated. Let's start with some historical fiction. If you are interested in that genre, I would highly, highly recommend Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I've recommended this to several people. Again, not necessarily because she's a Black author, but because the book is so good. It's so good. It was one of my favorite ones I read last year. It follows two sisters who are separated many, many years ago. One is sold off into slavery, one is behind with her tribe, and then all of the different generations of people who come afterwards from those sisters and the experiences that they have. We only follow them for a brief time in their lives, so we only see glimpses with a few pages into each of the people. And it makes me want to delve more and more into each of those individual stories, but even with that brief glimpse we get of the people, I feel like I saw so much. If you would like to read a children's book, I would recommend The Watsons Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis. My kid actually recommended this one to me because they read it in his school, and so I checked out the audiobook version of this, narrated by LeVar Burton. Yes, LeVar Burton of Reading Rainbow. Special shout out specifically to LeVar Burton and all of the reading literacy promotion that he's done for young people across the country for several decades. In The Watsons Go to Birmingham, we follow a family, an African American family in 1963. Kenny is a young boy. He has an older brother who is, I think he called him a certified delinquent. So the family packs up and goes to stay with grandma for a while in Birmingham, Alabama, to kind of get just a change of scenery, change of pace. While they're there, the bombings of the churches happen, and we get to see Kenny deal with his feelings about that, going from kind of this insular community to another one in which he's exposed to the realities of hate and prejudice in the world, murderous prejudice, and the feelings he has from that. It got me kind of teared up. Not kind of. It actually made me tear up, and it's really interesting because my kid, who hates books, was really into this book to the point that he was like, read it, read it, read it. If you would like to read some humor, might I recommend I Can't Make This Up by Kevin Hart. I'm actually in the middle of reading this one right now, so I've gotten so far through his childhood with his very, very strict mother, who made very, very sure that he did not get on the wrong path. And now I'm in his days as a struggling comedian, working his way up through the ranks. Dude works hard. He is not an overnight success by any means. I know that he is a little bit of a controversial figure in the dealings with his ex-girlfriend. But aside from that, the book is really good. Literary fiction, I have two to recommend here. Actually, I could recommend many, many more, but I'm going to just stick with two for right now. One is So Much Blue by Percival Everett. I just finished reading that. Oh my goodness, it's such a book. So it's one of those books that for the longest time I had a hard time connecting to it. I thought it was a series of disconnected vignettes. It shows a man who is a painter of some acclaim. He's middle-aged, he has a wife, daughter, a son, and he is simultaneously remembering these two different events that happened in his past. One is his affair in Paris with a much, much younger woman, and one is his time in El Salvador with his best friend, looking for his best friend's erstwhile brother. So these two stories were going on, or three stories were going on concurrently through the book in flashes, and I was like, well, I mean, it's interesting, but what does this really have to do with anything other than the fact that the main character is just kind of a messed up, unlikable, messy man. And then it just all came together. It came together so beautifully. So think of it like a work of art. So if you look at an abstract painting, you see all the whirls and lines and shapes of paint on the canvas, and you know, at first it looks like a big mess that doesn't really make any sense. But then all of a sudden, the shapes and the lines and the whirls come together to make this beautiful masterpiece. And that's what happened with So Much Blue. Yes, the guy is highly imperfect, and I think that's actually what I like about it. I've mentioned before how much I have an affinity for messed up, imperfect main characters, and this definitely delivered on that front. People aren't perfect, people have flaws, and we're all struggling, whatever sort of race, religion, gender, sexual identity, whatever sort of individual traits we bring to the table, we're all highly imperfect people, and I just love seeing that in a book. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and recommend the other literary fiction piece, which is On Beauty by Zadie Smith. Again, this has an imperfect character. This one is a white male, but he's married to a black woman, and he also is just not doing well in life. He's kind of stumbling through his career, stumbling through his marriage. And again, it's one of those that initially looks like kind of a slice of life where you're seeing these stories that, I mean, why do I really care about this? And then before you know it, you're deep into the story and you care very deeply, because it's not just giving you this look at a slice of life, but it's also telling you about the identity of a person, and not just the character, but the identity that any person in that stage of life might feel. Very interesting book. Okay, next genre. If you are looking for a classic, I would recommend The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Now, this is one I read many moons ago back in college. In fact, did some pretty heavy-duty research papers on it, and I would probably think that a lot of people have done the same, because this book is so revolutionary, hard-hitting. Boy, it's hard to find the right word for it, but basically it follows a man in the 1950s, I think, in the 1950s, who he's African American and having a really hard time finding his identity and kind of stumbling from one thing to another. And honestly, it's been so long since I've read it that I can't remember every specific thing that happens, but I remember thinking that it was a force. The book was a force. It's definitely recommended reading for anyone who's into literature at all. Memoir. If you're in the mood for a memoir, I would recommend Hunger by Roxane Gay. Now, Roxane Gay is the famed author of many different books, including Bad Feminist, but Hunger is the one I'm going to talk about today because it is so giving. She's so giving of herself in talking about her innermost feelings and struggles. It's nonfiction. Many years ago when she was a teenager, she was brutally gang raped. Since then, she's had a really difficult relationship with herself, with her body, with food, with using her body as armor against a cruel, hard world, and then also being able to open herself up to the beauty that exists in the world as well. So I'm just so grateful for that book, because she makes herself so vulnerable for the reader, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful and inspiring. Right, moving on to the next one. If you know me at all, you will know that my recommendation for a young adult novel would be The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. It features a teen girl named Star, whose friend is killed by a trigger-happy, scared police officer. And so Star, who is living in a poor section of town but going to this private school, finds herself kind of trapped between two worlds, and then also getting more and more enmeshed in the Black Lives Matter movement. It broke my heart. It broke my heart, but at the same time, it really gives a human face to the struggle, because Star is just a girl. She's just trying to make it through a difficult situation. And Oh, I liked her so much. And the book is just wonderful. It's another one of those that I recommend to a lot of people. For women's literature, some people call this chick lit, but I, as a woman, do not like that moniker because it's not like you look at men's literature and call it dude lit or anything like that. So for literature that someone of the female persuasion might be more inclined to read, The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. I actually have this one checked out from the library, ready to go, so I plan to read it very soon, and I'm looking forward to it. It's gotten a lot of acclaim. I believe the premise is that a woman is going to a wedding and needs a date. Enter man. I think love happens. For horror, I'm also going to recommend another author that I haven't read yet, but also have his book checked out. It's Victor Laval, and I'm going to recommend The Changeling. The reason I'm recommending this is because I have it on good authority that this is a good author. Whose authority? The Morning News. He made it to the Tournament of Books long list. And he's also, I believe, a friend of the tournament because he's been a guest judge before, had really good opinions on a book that I was not crazy about. Victor Laval, I'm going to read The Changeling, and I recommend that you do too. He has several other books, such as The Ballad of Black Tom, that I hear are also very good. One that you and I both should check out. All right, guys, we're going to get a little steamy here. A little bit steamy, and by that I mean a lot steamy. If you're in the mood for romance, which hovers more on the erotica side of it, I would recommend Haven by Rebecca Weatherspoon. It features an interracial couple, but that's not really the point of the book at all. It's more just a man and a woman who have had traumatic experiences and come together to try and figure it all out together. In bed. Wink. Moving right along, let's go to sci-fi. I am going to recommend Bloodchild by Octavia Butler. Octavia Butler is an African-American author of many science fiction novels. Bloodchild I'm going to recommend because it's an easy, short read. You can find it online for free. It's all about these humans living kind of as almost like pets of this different species that's almost like huge insect-like, and they impregnate men by implanting them with larvae, grubs, who then grow and, if they're not careful, eat their way out of the men. If they want to get them before they eat their way out of the men, then they extend their sharp claw and split them open to get the grubs out. Oh, it's disturbing. It's so disturbing and so good if you're into science fiction. So, Octavia Butler for the win. Bloodchild. Read it if you dare. This is a sentimental favorite for me. If you're in the mood for a biography, I would recommend Growing Up in the Jackson Family by LaToya. Yes, LaToya Jackson. Back in high school, I shared a locker with a friend, and she one day left LaToya Jackson's autobiography in there. I think she had checked it out from the library. And so, being the book dork that I am, I brought that book with me to all my classes, kind of stuffed it sneakily into my textbook, as I did all the time, and read it during class. And so it was really interesting reading all about LaToya's struggles, and the Jackson family. I am interested in the Jackson family. I am a fan, especially Janet Jackson, who I think was robbed at the Super Bowl halftime show. She should have gotten her time on the stage too for redemption. Whole other digression. But looking at it from LaToya's point of view was a little bit different. I actually really enjoyed reading the book. I think I finished it in like 2 days, which, when you consider that my only reading time was during class in high school, sneakily it kind of speaks to the interestingness of the book. For poetry, I am going to talk about actually a music album, and it is The Craft by Blackalicious. The whole album, the blend of lyrics and musicality, and the whole thing just flows like poetry. If you haven't listened to The Craft by Blackalicious, you definitely should. Of course, I know there are lots of other African American poets out there who I should be also recognizing, such as Maya Angelou. Everyone knows about Maya Angelou, so read her also, and then listen to The Craft by Blackalicious. Really good album. For graphic novels, I would recommend The World of Wakanda by Roxane Gay, with contributions by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I actually came upon this when I was researching Ta-Nehisi Coates and saw that he is the author of a series of graphic novels for the Black Panther series. And so the world of Wakanda is an offshoot of that follows females who are in a fighting school. It's really interesting because these really accomplished authors are doing this story, so it adds a little bit something extra to it. I'm normally not a graphic novel person. I don't have anything against them at all. It's just not a genre I really go to very often at all. And so it was kind of delightful to find this. For business, I would recommend The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Honestly, anything by Malcolm Gladwell, because the dude's a genius. So Blink, The Tipping Point, The Outliers, and then also his wonderful podcast, Revisionist History. It is so, so interesting. He looks at things that we saw one way in history and gives an alternate view, just like the title suggests. So I kind of just repeated the title there, but still. Really good podcast, really good series of books. The Tipping Point talks about what it is that takes something over the edge. Of course, you have to do all the work to get something there, but what is it once you get something where it needs to be that tips it to where you're trying to go with it? So very interesting book. Very interesting series of books. Everything that comes out of that guy's mouth is super interesting. For budgeting, I would recommend 7 Money Mantras for a Richer Life by Michelle Singletary. I actually checked this book out from the library several years ago because I was not really having a rich life. Not that I'm rich now, but she gave the sort of common sense advice that really anyone should take to heart. She talked specifically about her grandmother, who even though she was crazy poor, made hardly any money at all, when she died, she owned her house outright, had no debt, she was doing just fine. And so a lot of times in the back of my head when I'm struggling, I think about Michelle Singletary's straightforward advice and her grandmother. If Michelle Singletary's grandmother can do it, why would I need to struggle so much? Just cut back. Cut back. If you don't have the money to buy something, don't buy something. I mean, it's really as straightforward as that. It's just so common sense that I think a lot of people in America in general have lost sight of because we live in a world of credit cards and more fabulous things. Sometimes you just got to pull back. All right, nonfiction is going to be Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This one was a really interesting and eye-opening read for me. He talks a lot about his feelings of his body and not feeling like his body as an African American person is necessarily his own. It's always been compromised by things like slavery or by people thinking that they have more of a right to a space than he does or his son does. And he just takes us through the whole thing. Now, I felt like I needed to learn more because it was almost like a door was cracked that I couldn't fully see through. And so I did some more digging and read more about Ta-Nehisi Coates and his writing, and read a couple of interviews by him, and he very rightfully said that he was a little bit uncomfortable after that book because he had so many white people coming up to him saying, I never thought about it that way, and he didn't really feel like it was his job to be the black explainer of things, which is completely understandable. It's kind of a world that was opened up that makes me just think more about people's different perceptions. In one of the interviews I read by him, he also talked about the Me2 movement and how he did not realize how pervasive it was for women because he just didn't see it. And it's kind of the feeling that I have thinking about the things that he was bringing up. Just like he can never fully understand what it is to be a woman and the feeling of powerlessness that they might have or of not being believed or the fear. I can never fully understand what he's going through, and so I appreciate him opening up that book, that page in his life. Even though he's not the official spokesperson for anything, nor am I the official spokesperson for anything or any movement, boy, how do I even explain it? I think I'm still kind of working out my feelings from it. Just, it's appreciated. It's appreciated that he brings those thoughts forward, and I appreciate getting to hear them, read them, and learn more. That's really my endeavor in all of this, is not to be the expert. I'm not an expert on any of this. My endeavor is more to be an ally, to try and understand what I can, knowing full well I'll never understand everything. I'll never understand the full experience. I'll never understand what it is to feel the fear, the otherness. I just can't. But I want to make the endeavor. I want to make the endeavor to do what I can. So there you have it. There are some solid recommendations for African American authors that you can read all across the genres. Not all of the books are necessarily about the African American experience, but more they're just books by authors that you should definitely read. Don't just take my word for it. I would recommend especially that you go to the search bar of YouTube and search out Black History Month, Black Writers, and then also look for the booktube tag Read Soul Lit. There are a lot of great booktubers giving a lot of great recommendations using that book tag. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time. Bye.